evening, everybody. The thunderstorms are back here in Texas. Finally have some activity to look at, and this time lapse shows the progression of the moisture northward towards the front coming out of Oklahoma, and you see a lot of stratocumulus layers and some higher stratocumulus and a little bit of cumulonimbus in the background there. But last night, about 5 in the morning, I saw the moon out there and went out and got some shots. Beautiful full moon. And that actually hits the full moon tonight. So this is just before that. And you can see the moisture in the background coming up from the south. Wanted to mention, let's see, in addition to the moon, full moon tonight, we've got elongation of Mercury. Greatest elongation, which means it's furthest to the east, and Jupiter is at opposition, which means we've got the best view of it right now. And let me show you a little bit of what I mean here. I've got a graphic up. There you go. So you can learn a little bit about astronomy on the webcast here. So here's Jupiter at opposition, so it's directly behind the Earth, and it's the closest it will be for probably close to a year at least. So if you got binoculars, you can definitely check that out. It should be the brightest star in the sky if you can see it. And then Mercury, greatest elongation, which means it's the angle of it between that and the sun is the greatest, which means after the sun goes down, you'll have a very good view of Mercury. That'll be just above the southwest horizon. And I also wanted to mention, I don't know if we got Sue in the webcast, but I wanted to mention, let me see if I can bring up the webcam. Yeah. Sue from Indiana sent along this video here. This is storm chasing the EF5, May 3rd, 1999 tornado outbreak, and she sent this to be used. If we have another contest here, we can give that out as a prize of some kind. So maybe this upcoming weekend or the next one, we can run some sort of contest. And also, as far as Patreon goes, thanks to Sarah for the donations, and Sarah there in Indiana, and Tom Johnson in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Here we can see the thunderstorms moving through Texas, and they are kind of disorganized because we're lacking the stronger upper level winds. The cold front has kind of outrun that, and I'll show that to you momentarily. But you can see the northerly winds back behind that frontal boundary opposing the flow up from the Gulf, which you saw against that full moon. So leading edge of the front in this area right here, and we are getting thunderstorms right now. So if you hear a blast of thunder, that's going to be one of these cells here. So leading edge of the front, roughly from about Junction up to Texarkana to Little Rock, and then up to Illinois. And we do have a lot of thunderstorm activity, so it's going to be hard to cover all of this during the webcast at once. That's a typical problem here during the spring. But going up north, you can see the cooler air coming down from the northern plains. Anticyclone looks like it's northwest or northeast of Rapid City out in this area here. So east of that, we've got northerly winds, cool temperatures, and to the west of that, we've got the very start of some return flow from the south. Ketchum and Vetter, which is where we get our GOES 16 data. GOES are showing what it looks like under the clouds here, where you saw the time lapse. So showing a lot of debris from all these anvils spreading to the east, a few overshooting tops where we have updrafts reaching the top part of the tropopause, and here's a particularly strong updraft right there. And we can also see some gravity waves, very weak ones, but they are there spreading away from these storms. And then as we go further to the north, we pick up some of the strong storms in the I-30 area, also up near Paris, Texas. And then after that, we get into the dry, cool air up to the north in Oklahoma. 250 millibar flow looking like this. Got the long wave trough off the west coast and some long wave ridging across the east coast. So that gives us kind of a stormy pattern out west. And the polar front jet located from about the Four Corners up to the Central Plains and then to the Great Lakes. And you can see how we're under weaker flow here in Texas. We've only got 50 knots up at 250 millibars, 34,000 feet there. So 50 knots is kind of marginal for severe weather. We really want to see 80 to 100 knots to get organized storms. And we have that up to the north, but it has outrun the cold front. So probably some better chances of severe weather, possibly up in Illinois. And we'll try to take a look at that in a minute. Here's the 500 millibar chart showing the front from the polar front jet from the Four Corners up to the Great Lakes, similar to the 250 chart. And there's a quick look at the satellite imagery, and we can see some of the more organized thunderstorms there in Illinois. And we'll try to take a look at this briefly. Let me fix this here real quick. You can see a lot of the cells just south of Dallas here. Strongest cells appear to be west of Waco. So let me bring up a radar for Illinois. And in GR level 2, I have to go to this list to bring that up. And I guess I'm going to bring up Lincoln. And while that's coming up, this is probably a good time to go to chat and make sure my levels look good. Andrew checking in, first one in. Had a strong hailer pass through Peoria, Illinois today. Coworker lost a rear windshield. Yeah, that's some significant hail there. Victor Cabot is here, and Alexi in Texas. Ryan Toomey's from Florida checking in, and Sue M. And hopefully Sue saw the video. It did arrive. Kevin McKinney is here and Fun with Tech. Tom J. Appreciate that donation. Thomas Copeland is here, and David Holcomb keeping GR2 analyst up all night. Alexi says a great storm came through the Fort Hood area earlier today. So that's going to be right there in central Texas, north of Austin. Victor Cabot sent some photos of the front and dry line north of DFW. I haven't been on email, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to take a look at that a little bit later. But I appreciate it. Mike Wan is here, and Ryan says East Texas and Arkansas under the gun this evening. Michael Burrell made it in. Andrew says Tim's got advertisements that start the show now, big time. I have to take a look at that and see what they put in there. I think I re-enabled monetization of the channel, but depending on how Patreon goes, I'm going to try to figure out how to work all that. So anyway, if it gets to be a problem, let me know. Michael Burrell says, beautiful weather in Georgia, but the humidity has started rolling back. Yep, getting into that time of the year. Ryan Toomey says, severe thunderstorm and tornado warnings posted. Ryan Myers checking in, and Ron Chalfant in Southern California. And Ryan is watching flight weather data across the Midwest. Live flights due in tonight into southern Florida. Joshua Gilbert says it's 35 in central Wisconsin. Quite a cool down there. Thomas says audio sounds good. Same thing from Ryan, and Sarah Wood just skirted by a strong thunderstorm there in Indiana. So we can see some of the storms here making it across the border just south of Gary down to just north of Champaign. And a few storms down the interstate all the way down to almost St. Louis here. Just one little severe thunderstorm warning here on this cell out west of Effingham. And then we lose the cells getting out of radar range, but there's a few of them in central Missouri there. So fortunately right now these storms are not too organized right there. We see one more severe thunderstorm warning just southwest of Grand Rapids out in this area here. I guess that would be around Benton Harbor. I don't know my cities too well in Michigan, but anyway, there you go. So let's drop back to the charts here, and we'll take a look at the thickness. And this will give us the locations of the fronts, and we're looking at something like that for the polar front. And then the warm front extending into Ontario, then up to Quebec. A position about like that right there. So the colder air is set up in Minnesota and the Dakotas and working its way southward behind that front. Also some cold air in the Pacific Northwest. We can see that in Oregon and Washington and Idaho. And we've got the polar front somewhere from northwest Mexico up to Las Vegas, somewhere in this area here. So that would require a little bit more chart analysis to figure out. And that can be important because our next system is moving in from the west right there. So that'll be heading inland. Then for soundings, we should possibly take a look at Fort Worth, since that's pretty close to here. Showing what looks like a tropical sounding. Looks very moist all the way up to 500 millibars. So some very deep moisture there, and the lapse rates are steep. Not super steep, not like dry adiabatic, but that's certainly enough to give you a little bit of cape up here. If we were able to get a good mixed layer in here with maybe some upper 50s dew points, a little bit of heating, we might be able to get a little bit of cape here. But I think what we have here is elevated storms, and you can see this sounding here constructs a surface-based parcel. But that really is not what's happening here. We've got elevated parcels. You can see if we lift these, we get some pretty significant cape there. It's probably about 1,000 to 1,500 cape. It's enough to support some strong storms. So it's actually this layer here from about 3,000 to 5,000 that's critical. So this is kind of showing us that a lot of these storms here that we have are elevated. And not much wind flow. Kind of a weak wind pattern here. Then we can take a look further up the line towards, we don't have a good sounding for Indiana. I guess I'll take Wilmington. It's going to be in Ohio here, and they're a little bit ahead of the moisture. You can see very dry conditions there. Lapse rates coming up a little bit there in Ohio. And I think Lincoln is going to be back behind these fronts here. So there's the Lincoln sounding, and that's back right here where that radio sound launch is. A little bit of low-level moisture there, but very dry conditions aloft. Okay, let's take a look at dynamics real quick. We'll bring up the Meteostar chart here and stop the animation. And there we go. We can see a little bit of a upper level low over the South Dakota area. So the 0Z chart has got that moving into Iowa about right now. So this is what we're looking at right now. And the flow looks pretty channeled through here. The vorticity patterns are kind of paralleling the heights. We don't have any strong waves moving across the boundary, across the height lines. Maybe a little bit of a wave right there, but maybe one here too. But that's about all I can find right here. Okay, let's see what happens overnight. Looks like things shift pretty quickly to the east into the Great Lakes. Looks like maybe one little wave working its way across Texas right there tomorrow morning. So maybe the precip is not over for this area. Then for tomorrow, things shifting east into the Mississippi River Valley. So this is 0Z. This is when we do the webcast tomorrow night. You can see some sort of trough right there in Arkansas and Louisiana. But not much flow aloft, only about 20 or 30 knots there. So that's the thing. You've got a fairly strong trough there, but not much flow going through it. So things kind of cancel each other out that way. Then we have a strong one other trough moving across the northern plains here. And that moves into the Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota area here, 50 knots aloft. So maybe some thunderstorms up in the northern plains here about Wednesday. Then we got a little bit of a major trough coming in over the Great Basin area. And I think that is probably headed towards the central and northern plains again also for mid-month. Okay, there's one last look at the thunderstorms, and we see the cold front looking like that. Inverted trough here due to low pressure out over the Great Bend area. So the trough is kind of about the opposite of what you would normally expect. And by what I'm saying about that is if you have low pressure, classic frontal system, you normally expect to find troughs looking like that right there. So high pressures, you go southwest. In this case, we have high pressures, you go northeast. So that's why we refer to this as an inverted trough. And as we've seen, the soundings show not much wind aloft, just some moderate flow right there. Looks like once we get up to about 200 millibars, we do pick up some 70 or 80 knot flow there, so maybe a little bit of organization of storms possible with that, but fairly weak in the low levels here. Okay, let's take a look at the high-resolution rapid refresh, and this is good for a look at the thunderstorm trends overnight. And let me refresh this and we'll get the latest high-resolution rapid refresh data. And looking at the 0Z run here. And this looks pretty close. A lot of thunderstorm activity southeast of Dallas here. So the trend overnight, moving a lot of that into Arkansas and northwest Louisiana here. It looks like a little bit of training of these cells. So maybe some flash flooding if any of those storms are on the strong side. I'm going to go back to the 23Z run so we can see more of the forecast. Okay, so this is going to be about 4 in the morning here, so looking for some organization of the cells over East Texas. And you can see a very slow progression southward towards Houston by about 7 in the morning. So the very slow movement and what looked to me like training of cells would mean a little bit of flash flood potential here and there. Then the model has that pushing into Houston tomorrow morning. And then that's out of the picture by midday. For more information, we can head to the NAM 3-kilometer forecast. This gives us a little bit more of an extended picture of what's happening. This model is from 18Z, so it's a little bit outdated, but we can still use the data. So there you go. There's the overnight progression. By 4 in the morning, it's got most of it around the Waco area, a little bit different there. But in general, we see a little bit of a cluster heading toward Houston, and then it kind of breaks up there. A little bit of it hanging on in the Arkansas area and Mississippi. And let me shift up to the Central Plains here, or the Ohio Valley. Okay, so this is going to be about right now. We see the cells over eastern Illinois, and those move pretty quickly during the early evening into Indiana here. They remain scattered. And we see it moving into Ohio around 4 in the morning, down to Louisville, Memphis. Just kind of developing along that front, pushing southeast. Then 15Z, that's going to be about 10 in the morning. Into 1 p.m., we see things redeveloping with the addition of heating. And that redevelopment is going to be in Ohio, right here, around Akron. A little bit more redevelopment around Nashville up to Lexington. But overall, doesn't look too organized here. So anyway, that's the forecast based on the NAM 3-kilometer model. So we'll head into the pivotal weather chart here. And we'll look more at the medium range forecast. Okay, when we do the forecast tomorrow night, it's going to be looking like that. We see a very slow movement of the showers into southeast Texas along that front. Front looks like it'll probably be located something like this here. High pressure moving into the Midwest. And you can see that a lot of this area along the front here in the northeast U.S., it's becoming separated from the low-level moisture. So you see the Gulf here. Most of the flow is going into Texas and Arkansas aloft. It's not heading into the Ohio Valley. So we're not going to see too much surface-based stuff in this region right here. Okay, then heading into the forecast on Wednesday night, we see increasing southerly flow across Texas and Oklahoma. Maybe the low-level jet starting up. Model going for a little bit of development in West Texas right there. And our next front looks like it's set up something like this right here. And then connecting back to this other system in Nevada. So we've got our next weather system coming on shore here around Oregon, Northern California. You see some weather moving on shore right there. Here comes the next front through California. Going for a little bit of storm development here with this in the Texas Cap Rock with this southerly flow. However, it looks like the best flow, looking at all this thickness pattern here, right, is way up north. So we're going to see probably reduced flow over Texas. So not really any good chase potential in Texas for later in the week. Then things move eastward over the weekend, and then for Saturday we see this push into the northern plains here. Probably some storms up here in the Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin area. And we see that trailing part of the front right here. Northern Iowa down to northern Kansas. Then back into Arizona here. Texas and Oklahoma, Arkansas, just under northerly flow, or southerly flow with this open Gulf bringing moisture northward. Things pretty quiet except there in the Ohio Valley into Minnesota on Monday. And towards the middle of the week we see looks like a couple waves coming across the central part of the U.S. Maybe a bit of a warm front like that. And let's see here. Yeah, there we go with the next system. This is going to be on Wednesday the 19th. Warm front over Iowa. So again, more wet weather for the northern plains and not much for Texas here. So there's the next system coming eastward. And that affects the Great Lakes area around the 20th. Next system, again, the same track, wet weather again for the northern plains. This one looks like it has more of a punch back here, so this could affect the southern plains possibly later in the weekend there around the 23rd. But looks like mostly a cold front coming through, so kind of a big wedge, creating a lot of forced precip right there. Okay. Then we get to the end of the run right there. So let me take a look at the chat here and see what we got going on. Carl talking a little bit about getting a few good pictures last night out of 372 taken on his camera. What was my experience as an Air Force meteorologist? I'm not sure if I can really condense that into 1 or 2 minutes, but I really enjoyed my time in the Air Force, and I've got mixed feelings about leaving it, but, you know, it's nice getting to look at weather for different parts of the world and putting together forecasts in Africa, of all places, stuff like that, in England. And, yeah, I learned a lot from that experience, and I'd definitely do it again if I had the chance. Tornado warning posted for Harrison County, Texas, Rusk and Gregg. Gregg County, that's around the Longview area. I'm going to set the radar back down in that area here. Carl's next opportunity looks to be on the weekend. He can supply some of his pictures to the Weather Service, or he supplies some of his pictures every chance he gets. Excellent there. Severe thunderstorm warning for McLennan County. That's going to be Waco there. Checking in from Minnesota. Snowflakes falling. Can't even imagine that. And Tom J. says, when you're doing pivotal weather, can you get the date and time into the screen? I've been trying. That's kind of hard because you can see if I get that date in here when I'm doing this national weather thing, it cuts off the eastern part of the U.S. and the south. So I'm not really sure if there's any way I can do it. I can rescale the window, but then things get really tiny. I'm hoping eventually when I get faster internet, when we get more donations rolling in, I'm going to get the symmetric DSL setup. And when we do that, I can get 720p HD video. When that's sent out, I'll be able to cover a much larger desktop area, so that would fix that problem. So there's the possibility for that later. Africa weather, sunny, dry, and hot. Simple forecast, yeah. I do remember one time we were waiting for the shuttle bus outside the hotel there at Mombasa, and we were standing there, and there was this little bitty cloud moving over, and it looked a little bit dark, but we didn't think anything of it, and it dumped a whole lot of rain on us, and we were like wet there at the bus stop, and I was amazed that so much water came out of that cloud. But I guess there's a lot of aerosols out there, and it doesn't take much to set off a lot of rain in a place like that, and I think that's kind of an issue that forecasters have in Hawaii too. I've heard that doesn't take much to get a whole lot of rain out of some of those clouds there in that part of the world. So anyway, let's see here. I'm probably about done, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I appreciate you all watching the WeatherCast, and we'll see you all tomorrow at the same time, 8 o'clock. Take care.